short while ago, I finished painting up this Cerastus Knight Lancer, and it is glorious in all its Supernova glory. The only problem is it's about 95% done. There's a few little things, and one of those things is this shield. I'm not completely happy with how skeletonized it is. There's a lot of open air here, and it doesn't feel like it's giving him a lot of protection, but I think I know how I can fix it. And it involves root beer. This shield is a miniature void shield crackling with eldritch energies, and I want to fill it in and have it actually look like the lore. The root beer will give me the plastic, and the mug dog will give me some encouragement with that wry smile. I peeled off the wrapper and started carving. The thinnest part of the plastic is right where the wrapper used to be, and this is what I'll cut my shapes out of. This will give me some pretty crystal clear plastic, although I feel like I'm gonna be fighting that springiness of it. But first I need to check if this will work at all. I took some of the leftover plastic to use for test pieces. In a perfect world, I would slap the paint right on top, but I have a feeling that won't work. I put some light colored paint on my palette to give it a try. I started painting onto the plastic and the paint didn't know what to do. It beat it up, it didn't flow down properly, it was just really annoying. I expected that this would be completely hydrostatic and just the paint would not stick to it, but it actually sort of will if I'm very careful. It's not very strong though. It is incredibly easy to scratch off the paint from this super glossy surface. There's one little experiment I want to run before I commit to just brute forcing it. I sprayed my second test piece with some matte varnish. This will add a gritty texture that the paint will actually stick to. It basically acts as a clear primer. With this primer applied, the paint behaved normally. I was able to paint exactly what I wanted to, but the real test will be to see if a coat of gloss paint will get rid of that matte texture and bring it back to that crystal clear. Another great thing about varnish is it protects the paint job. Big vehicle models tend to get knocked around a fair bit, so I would prefer to use this model without worrying if the slightest touch will rub off my hard work. That did work. The matte medium let me paint exactly how I like to paint on top of it, and then the gloss paint did make it shiny and clear again, although it's a little odd. It looks crystal clear when you hold something right up against it, but as soon as you move away, it becomes cloudy and fuzzy. It's probably something to do with physics. I guess that surface is no longer perfectly smooth flat. It's actually got a million little surface imperfections, but considering this shield is always gonna be right up against that knight, I can live with it. Now comes the second challenge of cutting the plastic out to perfectly fit these holes. And speaking of hard work, another thing I have to worry about is keeping the plastic clean and fingerprint free. I gloved up and gave the plastic a wipe with some alcohol to remove any Cheeto dust and root beer remnants. The best way I could think to transfer the shapes to the bottle is a little blue tape. Sticking this onto the shield and using a pencil to trace over it. It'll give me a decent copy, although the tape will flex and stretch a little, so it won't be perfect. Now that I have the shape, I can transfer it to the bottle, and I can take advantage of the roundness of the bottle by lining it up with the curve of the shield. And if I cut off just as much of the bottle as I need, the curling isn't an issue. I used my X-Acto knife to make the detailed cuts on these little energy emitter studs, and for the rest of the cutting, scissors worked great. I lined it all up and slid the piece into place. It's pretty darn close, but it is wrong in basically every single dimension. I kind of expected that. This is going to take some serious fussin'. I went over and over and over, lining up the piece, cutting off a little bit more plastic and then double checking it. I was cutting off so little plastic, I caught my glove a little bit, but I eventually did get there. This is so hard. But it was the first one. The rest of them should go better. I figured out what the problem was. This shield isn't square on the sides, it's actually a hexagon. So for the other shapes, I traced out my edge and then took off an extra millimeter. And this did the trick. Even with the parts now fitting, this did take a long time. Holy cow, that was a slog getting these all cut out perfectly. And actually, none of them are perfect. They're all off a little bit, but hopefully some UV cure resin will come and rescue me. The middle circle was by far the worst offender for not fitting properly. I squirted the UV resin and way too much of it poured out. It's pretty thick, but still runny, about the same consistency of shampoo. Imagine trying to fill gaps with shampoo. I quickly grabbed a toothpick and started spreading it out, trying to fill the gaps. It didn't make the plastic edges disappear like I hoped it would, but at least it is physically filling in the open spaces with clear stuff. I used the UV light to cure working little by little. The resin is pretty thick, but still really hard to work with. I poured it on and used a toothpick to drag it into the corners of the shield. In some spots, it leaked through the gaps and started to drip out the back, and when that happened, I blasted it with the light to stop it. I got the shield cooking in this box. UV cure resin is gloopy, gooey, and hard to work with, but I got a clear shield now. It's not the perfect clear shield that I'd envisioned in my head. It's kinda gloopy and messy, but it does work. If when I try again, I think a smaller applicator for the UV resin would have worked better, maybe a syringe. And working harder to get more accurate plastic pieces would have also helped, but this shield still works and I have some ideas of how to hide the current crimes. I laid down some primer in the form of a matte varnish. For my crackling energy, I want neon green. I mixed a titanium white with some bright green ink. I took a nice big sharp brush and dragged it across the clear plastic. I love doing energy effects because of the wiggle factor. It's very abstract, and really apart from making sure the lines aren't too fat, it's hard to go wrong. On any spot where the UV resin was too gloopy, I hid it behind a bunch of energy tendrils. This was looking pretty good, but I can step it up a notch. I sprayed white ink onto all the energy studs. This glow will hide a lot of my mistakes with painting and make it look a lot more realistic. These white spots are the brightest spots, and I used a green ink around it to diffuse them and blend them into the shield. Inks are transparent, so I don't have to worry about them breaking the illusion of the clear plastic. And you know what has never broken my illusion? That's right, our Patreon. Over there we have a brand new STL set every month for our members. This month we have orc vehicles with grot tanks, trucks, war rigs, and grot riggers. We also make extra episodes of EOB where we take a look at our patrons' minis and give some ideas and critiques of how to improve their painting, and our top supporters get their names immortalized as members of my Black Templar. Now that looks more like a miniature void shield generator. Now the only question left is, will a gloss coat bring this back to clear? This was nerve-wracking. If this doesn't work, the shield is pretty well destroyed. I sprayed on 2 thick coats of gloss varnish and let them dry fully. It worked, it's pretty darn clear. I absolutely love the way it looks. And then I went to go put it on the knight and I forgot the void shield generator goes in the middle. You know what, that void shield generator, that bit is for people who don't do this, who don't fill in the shield. And I have to pop that sucker off. I pried the shield off with a screwdriver, and that super glue bond was on there so strong the pegs of the shield were left behind. Now, because of that clear plastic, you can see the mistakes crystal clear. I found this Imperial headlight that's a pretty good fit, so I glued this to cover up the hole and painted it to match the original painting on the arm. It still looks the part, and now I have an extra void shield generator bit to use somewhere else. Hell yeah, this knight keeps getting better and better. The shield is a little hokey, a little action figure-y, but you know what? It's a giant stompy robot with an energy shield. The old shield was also a little silly. And so is the new one, but in a much more awesome way. The neon green does a really good job of popping out of the dark armor of the knight. It's a little rough around the edges. I'm gonna have to give it a second try, maybe with some Tau shields. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching.